My name is John H., and I'm an alcoholic. I'm also a drug addict and a compulsive gambler. In this Code Blue Big Book Study in Action seminar, we're going to go through the recovery section of the Big Book line by line, and we're going to do the action that our book tells us we must do to recover from the seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body. This is based on the Canadian method used by the Golden Slippers, but I also borrow a lot of information from the Joe and Charlie Big Book Weekend tapes, as I feel their interpretation carries so much depth and weight. Sometimes I use their material verbatim, so don't get angry at me. Sometimes they can say things a lot better than me. This action and study is designed so that you can follow along in a 4th edition Big Book. Have your pen and highlighter ready. I don't claim to be any kind of big book guru or top 10 spiritualist. I'm just a simple drunk who was almost dead from the disease when a group of my heroes, some recovered alcoholics, took me through the book 5 years ago and saved my life. There's also some paperwork that you can download. Hopefully I'll get that online as well. Some from Joe and Charlie and some from the Golden Slippers. Please forgive any mistakes, errors, or misquotes you may detect. I'm sure there are many, for once again, I'm just a simple drunk trying to help other folks as I was helped myself. Thanks for listening. Good evening, everybody. I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. During the 1950s, a man by the name of Max C., now deceased, started a group in Winnipeg, Manitoba called the Golden Slippers. The group was a back to the basics of the Big Book kind of group, especially for those people who could not stay sober for any length of time. The group took a bunch of chronic slippers and walked them through the steps, taking the action exactly as laid out by the first 100 men and women who wrote the basic textbook Alcoholics Anonymous. This is not your typical thanks for sharing kind of AA meeting, nor is it like any seminar. Participants are asked to do all 12 steps as laid out in our basic textbook. One or more of the people who have done this work before will be guides to lead you through the instructions in our basic textbook using a dictionary published at about the same time as the book Alcoholics Anonymous to help us better understand the directions as they were written by the first 100 men and women. We ask every participant to commit to the entire process. Though we read and study the AA Big Book, this group is not limited to members of AA. We who have participated in these groups before have come to understand that these sessions make us much better sponsors. We can now lead people through the steps exactly as given to us by those who have gone before, unfettered and unchanged. In addition to being a boot camp for sponsors, we also feel this is especially valuable to those who've been through some sort of treatment or rehab and have been, in effect, left off at step 3 or 5. Recovery requires that we do all 12 steps. We recover in AA by taking the steps, and if we don't take the action as described in our basic textbook, we might not recover. The study and action sessions will guide you through the steps precisely as the first 100 men and women laid them down. These are back to the basic sessions, accepting the simple kit of spiritual tools that's been laid at our feet. Let's open with the set-aside prayer. God, please let me set aside everything I think I know about sobriety, life, and you, so that I may be open to a new experience. Peace. All right, guys. Thank everybody for coming tonight. This is our last session, and I did put some flyers up here just to kind of let you know what they are. I've got 2 flyers for the Code Blue right here, and one of them tells its kind of main purpose, which is for chronic relapsers. But then I've got another one that just kind of describes what we do, because some people might get a little upset if you give them the chronic relapser one if they're not chronic relapsers. So kind of what we're going to do, what I do is I tailor this to people. So somebody that's really having a hard time and can't get sober, they're going to get the chronic relapser. Somebody that's been sober for a little while, they're going to get the other one that just talks about the 16-week course of action. So I've got 2 of those. I've also got a flyer for a meeting that I go to that's right here in the club on Saturday night. It's every Saturday at 7 p.m. It's a call-up bucket meeting, and it's a lot of fun. If you take a ticket, if you get called, you go and you pull a topic out of a bucket, and you talk about that for 1 to 5 minutes, but if you don't want to talk, you don't have to. That meeting, again, right here in the club every Saturday night also needs support. So if you're ever free on a Saturday night, please come. It's actually kind of a fun meeting. So that's my paperwork for today. Now, last week, we did the chapter which was devoted to step 12, and that took up the whole time, so we kind of ran out of time. And I'm just going to talk about a few things that I didn't have time to talk about last week. One of which is this wonderful, it's kind of a prayer poem that, I've been around for 5 years and I've never heard this one before. I just thought it was so cool. So I wrote it up on the board here. You can kind of take a picture of it. And it goes like this. I am the place where God shines through. Him and I are one, not two. We need not worry, fret, or plan. He wants me as I am. And if I be relaxed and free, then He'll carry out His plan through me. I just thought that was pretty cool. Never having heard that one. Hey, Carolyn, welcome. Grab a seat. One of the other things that I got out of the 12 and 12, when they were talking about step 12, Bill said that we should live usefully, right? Live our lives usefully. That's something I never did when I was out there using. Live usefully and walk humbly under the grace of God. And he went on to say, right action is the key to good living, right? And the joy of good living is the theme of AA's 12th step. So I got that out of the 12 and 12. And then just a quick review, guys. We did cover this, but 6 things that you can look for in a sponsor, but also 6 things that you look to yourself to be if you want to be a good sponsor. And we should have written this down last week, but I'm going to repeat it. The first thing, of course, is to be sober, not drinking. The second thing, we've done the 12 steps. The third thing, we have a sponsor ourselves. The fourth thing, we're not afraid to tell the truth even when it hurts a lot. The fifth thing is a sponsor should be active in service work, right? And they should be very grateful, because when you're grateful, you tend to be active. And the sixth thing is to laugh a lot, right? I don't want to be hanging out with some sourpuss. So I want somebody that likes joking and laughing and doing fun things. So those were 6 things that we can look at when we're finding a sponsor. And hopefully there's 6 things that we ourselves can be when we're being a sponsor. And then another thing too, a lot of people have said, they've said, John, I've heard about the spiritual side of the program. If there's a spiritual side of the program, what's the other side of the program? Well, I'm going to tell you, there's a spiritual side. The other side of the program is the drunk side, right? So just keep that in mind. We've got to find that higher power. At least I sure did. When we're helping other people, right? When we're out trying to sponsor other people, I got this from Clancy, and I really like it. He's a guy that I listened to some of his tapes. Basically, he said we've got to convince people, because we all, in Alcoholics Anonymous, we all think we're different, right? My case is different. I'm going to look for the differences, right? So what we've got to do when we're trying to help somebody is we've got to convince people that they are enough like us, right, so that they're going to begin to take actions, right? These actions are the 12 steps. They begin to take actions that they do not believe in, right? The actions that they don't think will work and that they think are a waste of time. So we've got to convince people that they're enough like us that they'll do these things that they don't believe in. There's an old adage, and I don't know if it's out of the Bible or whatnot, but it says, I think it's just an old saying, give a man a fish, he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. And I really think that people, they come into AA and they say, give me fish, I want fish, I want fish. And they really get pissed off, because in AA, what we do is we give them fishing lessons, right? We teach them how to live. So, and one other thing that I heard, and if you're newly sober, and I wish I would have done this, one of the guys that I listened to, he said you should write down some things that you want to happen in your life over the next 10 years and put it away. He said this really works for newly sober people. You write down some things that you would like to see happen in your life, and you open that envelope 10 years later, and if you've been practicing these principles, I think you're going to be amazed that you had no idea what was good for you, because the things, if you continue to practice these principles in your life, what's actually going to happen is going to be far greater than anything that you can imagine. Friendship, the fellowship, the ability to care, help, and love others. It's going to be amazing. One last thing here on sponsoring. We're going to look briefly at the 4 questions of AA number 3. 4 questions of AA number 3. So let's quickly turn to page 186. To page 186. Now, AA number 3 is Bill Dotson, right? And if you ever see the pictures of the man on the bed, that's Bill Dotson, and that's Dr. Bob and Bill Wilson 12-stepping him. So we're at the top of page 186. We're going to go down 1, 2, 3. We're going to go down 3 lines, and we're going to highlight. Does everybody see it? Do you want to quit drinking? Okay, that's the first question. So highlight that and put a 1 next to it. Do you want to quit drinking? And this is just, these are 4 questions that we can ask people when we're out on a 12-step call. We're going to go down to the next paragraph, okay? And let's highlight the next 4 lines. The next thing they wanted to know was if I thought I could quit of my own accord without any help. If I could just walk out of the hospital and never take another drink. That's question number 2. Okay, now we're going to go down 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go down 5 more lines where it says the next thing. So let's highlight. The next thing they wanted to know was if I believed in a higher power. Okay, put a 3 next to that. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3 lines down. Next, they wanted to know, would I be willing to go to this higher power and ask for help calmly and without any reservations? Highlight that and put a 4 next to that. So those are 4 questions that we can ask people when we're out 12-stepping them. And, hopefully, do you want to quit drinking? Hopefully they're going to say yes. Can you quit on your own accord, right, without any help? If they're a real alcoholic, they got to say no. Right? Do you believe in a higher power? Some of us are going to say yes, some of us are going to say no. And hopefully if you are an atheist or the person you're trying to help, are you even willing to believe that there's something, right? And then the 4th one, of course, would you be willing to go to this higher power and ask for help calmly and without reservations? I don't know if I really believed or not, but my sponsor had me hitting my knees in the morning and asking, he just said, ask God for help to get through the day without drinking, because I was obsessing and I wanted to drink every day. And at night, when you make it, you hit your knees again and you say thank you, right? So those were just a couple of things that my sponsor had me do. But those are 4 questions that I just wanted to share with you guys. One of the other wonderful reasons that we work with other people, right? We're working with somebody who's new, right? And their life is kind of a mess, right? I mean, most newcomers, they are, right? So what we do when we're working with somebody is we're thinking about that sorry son of a bitch instead of this sorry son of a bitch, right? It gets us away from thinking about ourselves, right? So when we don't think about our own insecurity, our own worry, our own anger, our own self-pity, our own depression, right? Because we're thinking about the other person, right? And that's a wonderful way to get out of ourselves, right? And then I'm going to want you at let's see, where did we end last week? On what page? Where we wrote those 6 things of the sponsor, what sponsor down? What page was that?
103.
103. Let's go to 103. There's a little bit more room. I want you to write something else. So we're going to write 5 things, and they're just quick words, right? So let's write be quiet. And that's like when you come to Code Blue or when you go to speaker meetings or when you go to meetings. When you're new, be quiet is 1. Listen is number 2. Listen. Right? I mean, I know we can all be sitting at meetings and the meeting's over and we didn't hear a thing. So be quiet, listen. 3 is remember. Remember. Okay, so I want to remember what's said here and what's said at meetings. 4 is practice. Right? So when we hear some things and we identify with them, and you like what the speaker said, and he said some things that he or she did, we're going to try to practice them in our lives. Number 5 is teach. Teach. Right? So if we do those 5 things, we're practicing the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we be quiet, we listen, we remember, we practice, right? Practice what we heard. and then we teach somebody else. We teach, right? And by doing this, we're going to change. We're going to change. Now, guys, I got to tell you, I came in and out of these rooms for 20 years, and I'm going to tell you, if we do not change, we're going to drink again. If we don't change, we most certainly will get drunk again. And it could be in 3 days, it could be 3 weeks, it could be 3 years, it could be 30 years, right? If we don't change, we're going to drink again. So we've got to use these 12 steps as a tool of change, right? And the other thing, I want all of you to know, right? Because, you did that 4th and that 5th step and you looked at some hard stuff, right? We in our lives have never made a mistake so ugly that God cannot turn it into something magnificent, right? We have never made a mistake so horrible that God cannot turn it into something magnificent. So let's quickly flip over to page 124. And we're going to look at that first paragraph real quick. I know we're flipping around. Because we use what happened to us to teach others, right? We use what happened to us so other people can identify and they can take the actions that they don't believe in. So let's look at that. Let's look at the second paragraph where it says Henry Ford. Henry Ford once made a wise remark to the effect that experience is a thing of supreme value in life. That is true only if one is willing to turn the past to good account. We grow by our willingness to face and rectify errors and convert them into assets. The alcoholic's past thus becomes the principal asset of the family, and frequently it is almost the only one. The painful past may be of infinite value to other families still struggling with their problem. And that's with other alcoholics as well. So we're going to take the worst things that we've ever done and we're going to turn them into assets by using them and sharing them with other people that have done the same thing and think that they're the worst people on earth, and and we're going to try to get them to do these actions that we're doing here. All right. I think that was it, what we didn't get done last week. So now we are going to go to A Vision for You, which is on page 151. Let me see how many pages this is in. I might have to read fast here. Yep, I'm going to be reading fast. So, page 151, A Vision for You. For most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colorful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good. Highlight the next 2 lines. But not so with us in those last days of heavy drinking. The old pleasures were gone. Okay, just those little lines. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and a heartbreaking obsession that some new miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure, right? We keep thinking that it's going to be the way it was. We keep thinking that alcohol is going to do for us what it used to do for us, right? But it doesn't work anymore. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, highlight King Alcohol, and right next to it, right, was our God, right? It's capitalized. They capitalized deities, so alcohol was our God. Shivering denizens. One of the guys in my fantasy football league, they're all sober. That's the name of his team, Shivering Denizens. Shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us thought out sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily we did, then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous 4 horsemen. Highlight the 4 horsemen. Terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Okay, so off to the right, we're going to write the biblical 4 horsemen. Pestilence, war, famine, death. Pestilence, war, famine, death. Our 4 horsemen, terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair when we wake up. So again, pestilence, war, famine, death. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. Now and then a serious drinker being dry at the moment says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself. Inwardly, he would give anything to take half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. We're going to highlight the next 4 lines. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. Now that one, because at the end I was suicidal, I put the big ME after that. But if you didn't reach that point, don't write it down. But if you thought about suicide, just put me right after end if you've ever thought about it, right? Because that's what we do when we're at the end. We think, what can we do? And that's kind of the obsession and the allergy. Our mind tells us to drink, and we drink, and we drink, and we drink, and eventually our body stops us because our body can't take it anymore. And then our body stops us from drinking, right? And then a little while later, our mind makes us drink again, and we drink, and we drink, and then our body makes us stop because the body can't handle it. We stop, and then our mind makes us drink again, and we drink again and drink until our body can't take it anymore. Then we stop again. And it's a cycle that can go on for years and until we die. And again, that was me at the end. I couldn't live with it. I couldn't live without it. We have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life, highlight, where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum? Just that little line there. Like some righteous people I see. I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you a sufficient substitute? I used to think it was the end of the world if I couldn't do alcohol and drugs. What a horrible life it's going to be. Yes, there is a substitute. We're going to highlight this whole paragraph. Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. Next to that, we're just going to write the word promise. We get promises throughout this whole book, and that's a big one, right? That's a promise of spiritual experience. It's a promise of a wonderful life. How is that to come about, you ask? Where am I to find these people? You are going to meet these new friends in your own community. Near you, alcoholics are dying helplessly like people in a sinking ship. There's so few of us that get into Alcoholics Anonymous. There's so few of us. And even the vast majority that come into these rooms, there's just a small percentage of us that are lucky enough to get this thing and to stay. Most of us go back out and most of us die, right? Most of us don't even make it here. If you live in a large place, there are hundreds. High and low, rich and poor. These are future fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Among them you will make lifelong friends. You will be bound to them with new and wonderful ties, for you will escape disaster together. Highlight, and you will commence shoulder to shoulder your common journey. Then you will know what it means to give of yourself that others may survive and rediscover life. Stop highlighting there, and again, let's write promise. Right? There's another wonderful promise. You will learn the full meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself. It may seem incredible that these men are to become happy, respected, and useful once more. How can they rise out of such misery, bad repute, and hopelessness? Underline the next sentence. The practical answer is that since these things have happened among us, they can happen with you. Okay, so right next to that, let's write, we are not alone. We are not alone. When I came into AA, man, it was me, myself, and I. All of my friends were gone. My family wasn't talking to me. Everybody at work, they didn't like me. I mean, it was me, myself, and I. Now everybody that I know, I've got a fellowship of friends, and they're all sober. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. Should you wish them above all else and be willing to make use of our experience, we are sure they will come. The age of miracles is still with us. Our own recovery proves that. I'm sure many of you are like me. It's impossible that we could ever be sober. Our hope is that when this chip of a book is launched on the world tide of alcoholism, defeated drinkers will seize upon it to follow its suggestions. Many, we are sure, will rise to their feet and march on. They will approach still other sick ones, and fellowships of Alcoholics Anonymous may spring up in each city and hamlet, havens for those who must find a way out. In the chapter, Working with Others, you gathered an idea of how we approach and aid others to health. Right? That's basically a field manual for going on 12-step calls and sponsoring. Suppose now that through you, several families have adopted this way of life. You will want to know more of how to proceed from that point. Perhaps the best way of treating you to a glimpse of your future will be to describe the growth of the fellowship among us. Here is a brief account. Years ago, in 1935, one of our number, you can write Bill W., you write Bill W. and you can write Akron underneath it. Years ago in 1935, one of our number made a journey to a certain western city, so the city was Akron. From a business standpoint, his trip came off badly. Had he been successful in his enterprise, he would have been set on his feet financially, which at the time seemed vitally important. Highlight financially, which at the time seemed vitally important. And next to it, you can write 6 months sober. And I know for me, guys, I've been through 9 treatments, and I always made the mistake of running back into work because I said money is the most important thing. I've got to get back to work, and I would always go back to work before I had worked these steps, and I would always relapse because I always put recovery last. But his venture wound up in a lawsuit and bogged down completely, and we're lucky it did. The proceeding was shot through with much hard feeling and controversy. And again, Bill was only sober 6 months. Bitterly discouraged, he found himself in a strange place, discredited and almost broke. Still physically weak and sober but a few months, he saw that his predicament was dangerous. He wanted so much to talk with someone, but who? One dismal afternoon, he paced a hotel lobby. You can write Mayflower, the Mayflower Hotel. Won't keep you sober, but it's a nice fact to know. One dismal afternoon, he paced a hotel lobby wondering how his bill was to be paid. At one end of the room stood a glass-covered directory of local churches. Down the lobby, a door opened into an attractive bar. He could see the gay crowd inside. In there, he would find companionship and release. Unless he took some drinks, he might not have the courage to scrape up an acquaintance and would have a lonely weekend. Of course, he couldn't drink, but why not sit hopefully at a table, a bottle of ginger ale before him? After all, had he not been sober 6 months now? Perhaps he could handle, say, 3 drinks. Right above 3 drinks, let's write insane thought. Right? That's an insane thought. We know Bill's story. We know what happens when he takes even 1 drink. The allergy kicks in, and he drinks until he's flat on his back. Say 3 drinks, no more. So his brain is telling him that it's okay for him to go in there and have a couple of drinks. But, you know what? He's worked these steps. So here's what happened. Fear gripped him. He was on thin ice. Again, it was the old insidious insanity, that first drink. Right? That's the obsession. With a shiver, he turned away and walked down the lobby to the church directory. Music and gay chatter still floated to him from the bar. I can just see him, man. He hears the music, he sees the smoke, the laughter, the tinkling of glasses, and man, he's saying, those are my kind of people in there, right? But what about his responsibilities? His family and the men who would die, highlight. The men who would die because they would not know how to get well. Ah, yes, those other alcoholics, right? Just highlight that. And next to this whole paragraph, write the remedy. This is the remedy. I'm going to read it again from the start. But what about his responsibilities, his family, and the men who would die because they would not know how to get well? Ah, yes, those other alcoholics. There must be many such in this town. He would phone a clergyman. Highlight, his sanity returned and he thanked God. Okay, so that's going to happen to us. We're going to have these thoughts, right? Our brain is going to tell us, even when we've worked these steps, from time to time, we're going to get a strange little idea in our head, about, we might be at a stoplight, look over and see a liquor store with all kinds of pretty bottles in the window that we've never tried, and momentarily we might have that thought, right? But when we've worked these steps, that thought is going to pass, right? And we're going to ask God for help if we got to pull over, if we got to call somebody. But that thought will pass in a matter of moments, right? His sanity returned and he thanked God. Selecting a church at random from the directory, he stepped into a booth and lifted the receiver. His call to the clergymen, you can write Reverend Walter Tunks, Tunks. And you know, if you want to, there's you can get online, and there's aahistorieslover.com is a website, and you can kind of read about this stuff, and it's kind of cool. You say, hey, I got that name written in my book. So the guy he reached was Reverend Walter Tunks. His call to the clergyman led him presently to a certain resident of the town who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir. Nadir is low point. The nadir of alcoholic despair. And you can write Dr. Bob. That was Dr. Bob. And let's highlight the next 3 lines. It was the usual situation. I love it. Usual situation for us. Home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damaged, right? Standard stuff for us alcoholics. He had a desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal. Okay, so above the word abnormal, let's write the word allergy, right? When he starts drinking, he can't stop, and I guess you can write obsession too. Once he stopped for a while, his brain tells him that he has to drink. He can't take it anymore, right? He needs the relief. So obsession of the mind and an allergy of the body. The man did not fully realize what it meant to be alcoholic. This refers to Bill's first visit with Dr. Bob. These men later became co-founders of AA. Bill's story opens the text of this book. Dr. Bob's heads the story section. So let's highlight the next 5 lines. When our friend related his experience, the man agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. A spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. Just highlight that. And right after where it says alcoholic with a little asterisk, let's write war stories okay. Right? When Bill was 12-stepping him, Bill told him stories from his life. Right? When Bill got together with Dr. Bob said, I don't want to listen to some other guy talk about my drinking and tell me how bad my drinking is, that I have weak willpower, that I'm sinful. Everybody tells me that. I don't want that. But Bill didn't tell Dr. Bob about his drinking. Bill told Dr. Bob about Bill's drinking, right? So that Dr. Bob could identify with him. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. So this is Dr. Bob right now, right? He's worried. He's worried that if his patients find out about his, because he was a doctor, that he's going to be in trouble and he's going to lose what's left of his practice. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking, right? He doesn't think that his patients know he's a drunk. Why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business only to bring still more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? I mean, Dr. Bob was a surgeon, a proctologist. He's got, hey, I'm an alcoholic. You know, I've harmed you in the past. He says he's going to lose what little business he's got left. He would do anything, he said, but that. So Dr. Bob is not going to do steps 8 and 9. He'll do anything except for steps 8 and 9. Being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, highlight, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. Okay, so about 2 weeks after Bill had been working with Bob, Dr. Bob went to a convention, a medical convention in Atlantic City. And he went on a roaring bender. He was on like a 2-day blackout. For him, this was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw he would have to face his problem squarely, that God might give him mastery. So, you know, when Dr. Bob woke up, his hands were shaking. You know, he's in bed, and he had told Bill the night before that he had to perform surgery, right? And he was the only one that could do it. He had to go back in and perform the second part of a surgery. And he woke up, and Bill was sitting by his bed, and he looked Bill in the eye, and he said to Bill, Bill, I'm going to go through with it. And Bill thought he was talking about the surgery, but Dr. Bob was talking about going through with the rest of the steps, right? One morning he took the bull by the horns and set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. He found himself surprisingly well received and learned that many knew of his drinking. Stepping into his car, Let's highlight to the end of the paragraph. Stepping into his car, he made the rounds of people he had hurt. He trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particularly to a person in his line of business. So highlight that, and we're going to write step 9 after business. And then off to the left, let's write June 10th, 1935. That's Dr. Bob's sober date, and that's AA's birthday. So Dr. Bob, he had to do that surgery, and Bill took him to the hospital, and his hands were shaking, man. They were shaking. Bill reached into the back and gave him a couple of beers and said, drink these. Bob drank them down. He went up there, and he did the surgery, and it turned out well. And Bill waited for him in the car, right? Waited, and Bob never showed up. And Bill went to his house, and Dr. Bob didn't get home till late at night. And Bill was thinking, damn it, I gave him the beers. I triggered the allergy. He's out getting drunk. When Dr. Bob showed up late at night, Bill said, where the hell have you been? And Dr. Bob said, I've been going up and down the street making amends to those I've hurt through my drinking. So he finally did his steps 8 and 9. At midnight, he came home exhausted but very happy. He has not had a drink since, and we shall see he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4. But life was not easy for the two friends. Plenty of difficulties presented themselves. Both saw that they must keep spiritually active. Just highlight those 4 words, right? And next to that, let's write, help others, or we will drink. Help others, or we will drink. Right next to what we just highlighted. Help others, or we will drink. One day, they called up the head nurse of a local hospital. Okay, this is really cool. Highlight the next 4 lines. They explained their need. So they called up the hospital and they said, look, we need to come and help another alcoholic as part of our recovery. We need to do this. They didn't say, we're going to save the day for somebody else. They said, we need to do this for ourselves, right? They explained their need and inquired if she had a first-class alcoholic prospect. She replied, yes, we've got a corker. He's just beaten up a couple of nurses. Goes off his head completely when he's drinking, but he's a grand chap when he's sober. Though he's been in here 8 times in the last 6 months. Right? So this is kind of a hopeless case. So we're going to write off to the left, we're going to write AA number 3. AA number 3. And then we're going to write 10-day difference. 10-day difference, Bill Dodson and Dr. Bob. Right? So June 10th, Dr. Bob. June 20th, Bill Dodson. AA number 3, 10-day difference between Bill Dodson and Dr. Bob. So one of the other things, right, when Bob, after he made his amends, they'd been sitting around for 2 weeks talking about spirituality and God and wonderful concepts like this, but they decided the other thing we had better do is we had better refocus. We had better go out and start helping people right away. Right? So they did 2 things. Dr. Bob made his amends, and they immediately started going out to help other people because they didn't want another relapse. So AA number 3, 10-day difference, Bill Dodson and Dr. Bob, June 10th and June 20th. So they went right to work. Understand he was once a well-known lawyer in town, but just now we've got him strapped down tight. This refers to Bill and Dr. Bob's first visit to AA number 3. See the Pioneer section. This resulted in AA's first group at Akron, Ohio in 1935. Here was a prospect, all right, but by the description, none too promising. The use of spiritual principles in such cases was not so well understood as it is now, but one of the friends said, put him in a private room, we'll be down. Now, you don't need to write this down, but back in the day when they put people in a private room, that was a sign that the person was dying. So this guy was scared like you wouldn't believe. They put him in the private room. He thought he was a goner. 2 days later, a future fellow of Alcoholics Anonymous stared glassily at the strangers beside his bed. Who are you fellers and why this private room? I was always in a ward before. Said one of the visitors, highlight, we're giving you a treatment for alcoholism. After alcoholism, write the 12 steps. The 12 steps. Hopelessness was written large on the man's face as he replied, oh, but that's no use. Highlight the next 3 lines. Nothing would fix me. I'm a goner. The last 3 times I got drunk on the way home from here. Just highlight that and you can write, I'm afraid to go out the door. I can't understand it. Write hopeless in the margin there, hopeless. For an hour, the two friends told them about their drinking experiences. Underline that too. For an hour, the two friends told him about their drinking experiences. So again, Bill Dotson, everybody in Bill Dotson's life had always talked about Bill Dotson's. You're a drunkard, you're a fool, you have no willpower, you're sinful. Nobody sat down and told this guy their drinking stories, right? Over and over he would say, that's me, I drink like that. So these guys are understanding early on the importance of identifying, because all of us alcoholics and drug addicts, we think that we're unique. We're completely different from everybody, but that's not the case. The man in the bed was told of the acute poisoning from which he suffered, how it deteriorates the body of an alcoholic and warps his mind. Highlight, there was much talk about the mental state preceding the first drink. Next to that line, write mental obsession. Mental obsession. Right? Our emotions build up and we become so uncomfortable with life. You know, it might be 2 days, it might be 3, it might be a couple weeks, but eventually we become so uncomfortable with the conditions of our life that we have to change. We change ourselves, right, by taking the drink, and then we see things differently, right? What we do today is we do the same thing. We change the way we think, but not by taking a drink. We do it by taking the actions. Yes, that's me, said the sick man, the very image. You fellows know your stuff all right, but I don't see what good it'll do. You fellows are somebody. I was once, but I'm a nobody now. From what you tell me, I know more than ever. I can't stop. At this, both the visitors burst into a laugh. Said the future fellow anonymous, highlight, damn little to laugh about that I can see. And I got to tell you guys, that same exact thing happened to me. I just got out of detox and I was sitting in the New Hope Alano and I was telling a little bit about what was going on, and a couple guys across the table started laughing. I almost scrambled over the table and started swinging. I was so pissed. But they were laughing, right? And eventually I got it. The two friends spoke of their spiritual experience and told him about the underlying course of action. Just underline course of action, and under it write 12 steps they carried out. He interrupted. I used to be strong for the church, but that won't fix it. I prayed to God on hangover mornings and sworn that I'd never touch another drop, but by 9 o'clock I'd be boiled as an owl. Next day found the prospect more receptive, so they went back to him again the next day, right? So we're doing multiple visits to these people, whether they're in treatment centers or jails or detox, depending how long they're there. He had been thinking it over. Maybe you're right, he said. God ought to be able to do anything. Then he added, he sure didn't do much for me when I was trying to fight this booze racket alone. Right? Remember the 4 questions they asked him. On the 3rd day, the lawyer gave his life to the care and direction of his Creator. Next to that line, write 3rd step, page 63. 3rd step, page 63. And said he was perfectly willing to do anything necessary. Right? So, hey, I'm going to go through with the rest of this course of action. His wife came, scarcely daring to be hopeful, though she thought she saw something different about her husband already. Highlight, just that little phrase, he had begun to have a spiritual experience. Right? For me, that happened, guys, when I showed up to my first Code Blue, because I took action and I said, I'm going to do whatever these knuckleheads tell me to do. And I tell you, when I walked through the door of that first Code Blue, I felt some relief that I can't even tell you guys. That afternoon, he put on his clothes and walked from the hospital a free man. Highlight, a free man. It's that little thing. He entered a political campaign, making speeches, frequenting men's gathering places of all sorts, often staying up all night. He lost the race by only a narrow margin. Highlight the next 2 lines, but he had found God, and in finding God, he found himself. It's that little phrase there. That was in June 1935. He never drank again. Highlight that phrase too. I'm sorry, those 2 lines. He too has become a respected and useful member of his community. Okay, let's highlight the next 5 lines. He has helped other men recover and is a power in the church from which he was long absent. So you see, there were 3 alcoholics in that town who now felt they had to give to others what they had found or be sunk. Stop highlighting there. After several failures to find others, a 4th turned up. Next to the fourth, you can write Ernie Galbraith. Ernie Galbraith, Galbraith. And you can write married Dr. Bob's daughter Sue. Ernie Galbraith married Dr. Bob's daughter Sue.
What was the third one's name?
The third one was Bill Dotson. And then the fourth one is Ernie Galbraith, who married Dr. Bob's daughter Sue. He came through an acquaintance who had heard the good news. He proved to be a devil-may-care young fellow whose parents could not make out whether he wanted to stop drinking or not. They were deeply religious people, much shocked by their son's refusal to have anything to do with the church. He suffered horribly from his sprees, but it seemed as if nothing could be done for him. He consented, however, to go to the hospital, where he occupied the very room recently vacated by the lawyer. Now, unfortunately, when Ernie Galbraith got married to Dr. Bob's daughter Sue, they said, you know what, man? You go ahead. You've got to raise your family, so you take care of your family, and you leave this building of Alcoholics Anonymous to the rest of us. You just go and worry about your family. Well, he wasn't part of it, and he wasn't out helping other people, so guess what happened? Ernie started drinking again, and he was never able, after a long period of sobriety, he was never able to get sober again. And this caused Dr. Bob's daughter Sue to really resent and hate AA because her husband couldn't get it. So unfortunately, they should not have said, go raise your family. They should have kept him with them on the firing line of developing this AA for everybody. But you can read, again, you get on there and you can read the history about these people. It's quite fascinating. He had 3 visitors, right? So now all 3 of them visit him. After a bit, he said, the way you fellas put this spiritual stuff makes sense. Highlight, I'm ready to do business. Okay, write second step next to that. I'm ready to do business. I guess the old folks were right after all, so one more was added to the fellowship. All this time, our friend of the hotel lobby incident remained in that town. He was there 3 months. So Bill, his thing just collapsed. But he stayed there because he saw that something so wonderful was happening that he lived in Dr. Bob's house for 3 months to try to get this thing going, right? And they had great success with people, but they also had a lot of failures, right? So I think that we not only do we have to thank the people who got sober, but we've also got to thank the people that didn't make it, because I think they learned just as much from their mistakes as they did from their successes. He now returned home, leaving behind his first acquaintance, the lawyer, and the devil-may-care chap. These men had found something brand new in life. Highlight the next 4 lines. Though they knew they must help other alcoholics if they would remain sober, that motive became secondary. It was transcended by the happiness they found in giving themselves for others. Okay, so let's write next to that, give it to keep it. Give it to keep it. Right? And then write, receive happiness and usefulness. Give it to keep it. Receive happiness and usefulness. So they started out by saying, we had better do this just so that we stay sober and we can live. But all of a sudden, it says it was transcended by the happiness they found in giving of themselves for others. So that became dominant, right? To just the fact that they had to do it to stay sober. Give it to keep it and receive happiness and usefulness. They shared their homes, their slender resources, and gladly devoted their spare hours to fellow sufferers. They were willing by day or night to place a new man in the hospital and visit him afterward. They grew in numbers, they experienced a few distressing failures, but in those cases they made an effort to bring the man's family into a spiritual way of living, thus relieving much worry and suffering. Right? So obviously that's Al-Anon, the starting of Al-Anon. A year and 6 months later, these 3 had succeeded with 7 more, so now we've got 10. Seeing much of each other, scarce an evening passed that someone's home did not shelter a little gathering of men and women, happy in their release and constantly thinking how they might present their discovery to some newcomer. In addition to these casual get-togethers, it became customary to set apart one night a week for a meeting to be attended by anyone interested in a spiritual way of life. Okay, highlight the next 3 lines. Aside from fellowship and sociability, the prime object was to provide a time and place where new people might bring their problems. Okay, so you can write next to that over 1,000 meetings a year here, Minneapolis. I think by now there's even more. This was several years ago. Over 1,000 meetings a year here, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Outsiders became interested. One man and his wife placed their large home at the disposal of this strangely assorted crowd. This couple has since become so fascinated that they have dedicated their home to the work. Okay, highlight the next 3 lines. Many a distracted wife has visited this house to find loving and understanding companionship among women who knew her problem. Again, next to that, we're going to write Al-Anon. Al-Anon. To hear from the lips of their husbands what had happened to them, to be advised how her own wayward mate might be hospitalized and approached when next he stumbled. Many a man, yet dazed from his hospital experience, has stepped over the threshold of that home into freedom. Many an alcoholic who entered there came away with an answer. He succumbed to that gay crowd inside who laughed at their own misfortunes and understood his. Impressed by those who visited him at the hospital, he capitulated entirely when, later in an upper room of this house, he heard the story of some man whose experience closely tallied with his own. The expression on the faces of the women, that indefinable something in the eyes of the men, the stimulating and electric atmosphere of the place, conspired to let him know that here was haven at last. The very practical approach to his problems, the absence of intolerance of any kind, the informality, the genuine democracy, the uncanny understanding which these people had were irresistible. He and his wife would leave elated by the thought of what they could now do for some stricken acquaintance and his family. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. They knew they had a host of new friends. It seemed they had known these strangers always. They had seen miracles, and one was to come to them. They had visioned the great reality. See, that's capitalized. Their loving and all-powerful Creator. So next to that, we're going to write promise in big letters. There's another promise there. Now this house will hardly accommodate its weekly visitors, for they number 60 or 80 as a rule. Alcoholics are being attracted from far and near. From surrounding towns, families drive long distances to be present. A community 30 miles away has 15 fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. Next to that, you can write Cleveland. So those were the first 3 centers, of course, Akron, New York, and now Cleveland. Being a large place, we think that someday its fellowship will number many hundreds. Written in 1939. Okay, so we're going to highlight the next 6 lines. But life among Alcoholics Anonymous is more than attending gatherings and visiting hospitals. Cleaning up old scrapes, helping to settle family differences, explaining the disinherited son to his irate parents, lending money and securing jobs for each other when justified. These are everyday occurrences. So highlight that, and then we're going to go back, and in pen we're going to circle when justified. Right? So we're going to help, we're going to lend money, and we're going to secure jobs when justified. I do that when I see people are serious and they're doing the work, right? They're making the effort. Not the people that aren't willing to do any of the work, that only come in here, those guys that say, I just want fish, right? I don't want to learn how to fish. No one is too discredited or has sunk too low to be welcomed cordially. Again, let's highlight, if he means business. Just highlight those 4 words. And next to it, off to the side, write willing to do the work. Willing to do the work. If he means business. Social distinctions, petty rivalries, and jealousies, these are laughed out of countenance. Being wrecked in the same vessel, being restored and united under one God, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others, the things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? Under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many eastern cities. In one of these, there is a well-known hospital for the treatment of alcoholic and drug addiction. So again, next to that, write the town's hospital. The town's hospital, and that's where Bill went. He was in there 3 times. And as you can see, there were both alcoholic, drug addicts back then, just like there are today. 6 years ago, one of our number was a patient there. Obviously, that's Bill Wilson. Many of us have felt for the first time, highlight, the presence and power of God within its walls. So, next to that, let's write, here at meetings, right?
Sorry? Say that again.
Pardon?
What did you say?
Here at meetings, right?
Oh, okay.
So he was talking about feeling the presence and power of God within the walls because they went in there in 12-step people, but we do the same thing here at meetings, right? I know a lot of people, and I'm one of them. I think that this is a sacred place, Alcoholics Anonymous. We are greatly indebted to the doctor in attendance there, again, Dr. Silkworth, for he, although it might prejudice his own work, has told us of his belief in ours. So he's a scientist saying that he believes in something that they can't quantify in the spiritual experience, right? Finding God. Every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. Understanding our work, he can do this with an eye highlight to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. So next to that, right, do the 12 steps. Right? So he can see, who he thinks is willing to do the work, to do the 12 steps. Many of us former patients go there to help. Right? And we do that too. I mean, you got out of the retreat, you're going to go back there and you're going to help others. Whatever treatment center or whatever detox center, we're going to go back and we're going to help other people at the place that we came through. Then in this eastern city, there are informal meetings such as we have described to you, where you may now see scores of members. There are the same fast friendships. There is the same helpfulness to one another as you find among our Western friends. There is a good bit of travel between East and West, and we foresee a great increase in this helpful interchange. Someday, we hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. So next to that, let's write prophetic. 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 I mean, this was written in 1939. I can't imagine, that they could have imagined at that time what would have happened. Very prophetic. To some extent, this is already true. Some of us are salesmen and go about. Little clusters of 2s and 3s and 5s of us have sprung up in other communities through contact with our 2 larger centers. Those of us who travel drop in as often as we can. This practice enables us to lend a hand, at the same time avoiding certain alluring distractions of the road about which any traveling man can inform you. Again, written in 1939. In 2009, there are over 116,000 groups. There is AA activity in more than 180 countries with an estimated membership of over 2 million. Now, I've been to meetings in several other cities. I have not been to meetings in other countries, but people tell me it's absolutely wonderful. It's the same everywhere. Thus we grow, and so can you. Though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin. Right? You've got everything in this book, right? You can open up with what we open up with at all these meetings. You've got the promises. You've got everything that we read in this book. So you can do a meeting anywhere. We know what you are thinking. You are saying to yourself, "I'm jittery and alone. I couldn't do that," but you can. You forget that you have just now tapped a source of power much greater than yourself. To duplicate with such backing what we have accomplished is only a matter, highlight, of willingness, patience, and labor. Willingness, patience, and labor. After labor, we're going to write program of action / work. Program of action / work. We know of an AA member who was living in a large community. He had lived there but a few weeks when he found that the place probably contained more alcoholics per square mile than any city in the country. Okay, next to that, let's write Detroit. Detroit, and then we're going to write The Man Who Mastered Fear, page 246. The Man Who Mastered Fear, that's the name of his story, page 246. Archie T. Detroit, The Man Who Mastered Fear, page 246, Archie T. And again, we're the 4th edition. If you're in the 3rd edition, it may be different because they switch these stories around. More alcoholics per square mile than any city in the country. This was only a few days ago at this writing, 1939. The authorities were much concerned. He got in touch with a prominent psychiatrist who had undertaken certain responsibilities for the mental health of the community. The doctor proved to be able and exceedingly anxious to adopt any workable method of handling the situation. So he inquired, what did our friend have on the ball? Our friend proceeded to tell him, and with such good effect that the doctor agreed to a test among his patients and certain other alcoholics from a clinic which he attends. Arrangements were also made with the chief psychiatrist of a large public hospital to select still others, highlight, from the stream of misery which flows through that institution. So next to that little phrase we highlighted, write detox/treatment centers. Detox/treatment centers. Right? And you know, guys, I mean, a good treatment center, and this is, you know, the giants that have gone before me that have taught me, a good treatment center, what they're going to do is they're going to direct people to AA. You know, because when you go to treatment, treatment is discovery, right? But AA is recovery. Right? I mean, you're looking at a veteran of 9 treatments. I thought treatment was recovery. I thought that I got out of a 30-day program and I could jump right back into my life because I was cured. But I wasn't. Man, not until I came into these rooms and I did the work. I didn't stand a chance until I did that. So treatment is discovery, but AA is recovery. So our fellow worker will soon have friends galore. Some of them may sink and perhaps never get up, but if our experience is a criterion, more than half of those approached will become fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous. When a few men in the city have found themselves and have discovered the joy of helping others to face life again, there will be no stopping until everyone in that town has had his opportunity to recover, if he can and will. Still, you may say, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. We cannot be sure. God will determine that. So you must remember, highlight, that your real reliance is always upon Him. Highlight that. To the end of the paragraph there. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. Okay, so highlight that. And then after crave, we're going to write, give your phone number, take their phone number. Right? Give your phone number, take their phone number. When we've got people at meetings, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have said, yeah, here's my number, you know, call me. 99% of the people aren't going to call. I mean, that's for us alcoholics to call up and ask for help. It's almost impossible. But what we can do is we can take their telephone number and we can call them. You know, and I said this last week, you know, my sponsor taught me that you call somebody twice, you know, and if they don't respond, you know, we're not going to bug the hell out of them, but you keep that phone number and like a month later, 3 weeks later, you call them again once or twice, right? Because, you know, sometimes somebody might pick up and you might save their life, right? So we've got to take their phone number and we've got to get out of our comfort zone and we've got to call them. Okay? So I'm gonna read a few notes and we're gonna finish up with those last 2 paragraphs. Let's see here. I heard this from a woman, and this gal, she told me, she said that AA has rules for grocery stores. For grocery stores, right? And when she said that, I kind of figured, you know what, man? That she was telling me rules for life, but she was using the grocery store as an illusion, right? So the first one is, and you don't need to write this, but because you'll probably remember it, because I remember this. The first rule is you do not get into the 10 items or less line unless you've got 10 items or less. Right? We've been putting ourselves first and above the law our whole lives. Right? So we do not get in that 10 items or less line unless we have 10 items or less. Right? Now here's another one. If we're in that line, we don't count the number of items of the person in front of us. Right? We have been judging people our whole life and taking other people's inventory. We got to stop doing that. We're going to drive ourselves nuts. Okay, so we do not count their items. When we're walking around and we say, oh, God, you know what? I guess I really don't want this piece of steak, right? We don't take out the steak and just set it on the shelf. We go back to where we got it, right? So we resolutely clean up our mistakes as we go along in life, right? We've worked these steps, right? We've done steps 8 and 9. We want to keep ourselves clean. So we clean up our mistakes as we go along, right? And then now the other one, we see somebody that needs help carrying out their bags, right? We're going to help that person get their groceries to the car. We're going to help other people, right? So, these little grocery store rules are just a wonderful illusion about how we're going to live life, right? So, step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That's the first part, right? So that tells us that when we apply the first 11 steps in our lives to the best of our ability, this book promises that we're going to wake up spiritually. We are going to wake up to something that we have never, ever seen in our life, right? I mean, I never felt love, patience, tolerance, compassion for my fellow, and goodwill for my fellow man. I never experienced that till I worked these steps, right? I now believe in a kind and loving God who's going to be there to help anybody who asks for His help. I never believed that, never thought that until I worked the first 11 steps, right? And it tells us that we can now do many things that we could never before do, right? And one of those things, we are now charged to carry this message. And I'm talking about this message. I'm not talking about a message or any message, or you look at the steps on the wall and you try to make up your own message. No, I'm talking about this message, the message in this book, right? We are now charged to carry this message to other people. And I got to think that back in the 1930s, God must have got tired of seeing alcoholics die. We've been going out and dying. There's never been anything to help us for 4,000 years. We've been going out, we've been drinking, and we've been dying. I think God got sick of seeing that. And God always works on people through other people, right? Always works on people through other people. So I think that God picked the psychologist Dr. Jung, right? He picked Roland Hazard, that was his patient. He picked Abby Thatcher, the guy who went to Bill Wilson. He picked out Bill Wilson. He picked out Dr. Silkworth. He picked out Dr. Bob, and he picked the first 100 people, right? He got those guys. He picked them to get this AA thing put together so that we can have it today, so that we get to have it today. Now, all of these people that I just mentioned, they're all dead now, right? They're all dead. But if God was picking people back in the 30s, I think He's picking people now, right? I think He's picking us right here in this room. And I want you guys to think about it. Should any of us in the room be alive today? I mean, I don't know about you guys. I was in I don't know how many cars that got totaled, accidents. I mean, I should be dead. I certainly shouldn't be sober and having the kind of life that I'm having. Right? So I think God is picking people today. And I think He picked me. I think He picked you guys. And I think He let us go through hell, right? So that we're going to learn what we needed to know, right? So now He's ready to use us, right? He's removed our obsession and He's woken us up spiritually so that we can go out and help other people, right? We had to go through this stuff, right? So before we read those last 2 chapters, I'm going to read. I read a little bit of this earlier. This is something that was written by the Dalai Lama, and I'm going to read part of it. Relinquish your envy. Let go your desire to triumph over others. Instead, try to benefit them with kindness, with courage, and confident that in so doing, you are sure to meet with success. Welcome others with a smile. Treat everyone as if they were a close friend. If you cannot, for whatever reason, be of help to others, at least don't harm them. Try to help those who are downtrodden and those who, for whatever reason, cannot or do not help themselves. And with us, that's mostly alcoholics, right? Try not to turn away from those whose appearance is disturbing, right? Like that guy, that is drunk and dirty and smells, right? Try not to turn away from those whose appearance is disturbing. Try never to think of them as less or yourself as more. May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a bridge for those with rivers to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those without light, a place of refuge for those who lack shelter, and a servant to all in need. Right? I just think that absolutely is us people in Alcoholics Anonymous. All right, so we're going to end here with these last couple of paragraphs. So we're back to page 164. Our book is meant to be suggestive only. And again, I said this last week. If you're hiding behind the fact that it's suggested, they're the only suggestions we've got. So if you think there's something else, there isn't. We realize we know only a little. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. Right? Everybody confuses that. They say God will reveal. Right? No. God will constantly disclose more to you and to us. So we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. Ask Him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. The answers will come if your own house is in order. But obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. See to it that your relationship with Him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. This is the great fact for us. And you can see how the great fact is capitalized, right? That's a deity. So right next to that, we're going to write recipe for relationship. That's the recipe for relationship. And I got to tell you guys, I'm doing that step 11 thing both in the morning and at night. And I'm doing it religiously with that little sheet of paper that I gave you guys. And you know what? It only takes a few minutes in the morning and a few minutes at night. And I can actually see a difference, right? I never did that at night before. It's wonderful. So, what's that? The step 11 sheet that I gave you where it says the morning and the evening.
Right.
Yeah, I'd never done the evening thing, and I've been doing it religiously, and it's having a good effect for me. But for what I just read, that's a recipe for relationship, obviously with your higher power. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Okay, so next to that, we did that in steps 1 through 3. So steps 1 through 3 or just 1 through 3. Abandon yourself to God as you understand God. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. 4, 5, 6, and 7. Admit your faults to Him and to your fellows. That's 4, 5, 6, and 7. Clear away the wreckage of your past. That's steps 8 and 9. Steps 8 and 9. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit, and you will surely meet some of us as you trudge the road of happy destiny. Okay, so that's steps 10, 11, and 12. May God bless you and keep you until then. Right? And I know that word trudge, I should have looked it up in my dictionary. It meant a little bit different. Right? But it's just telling us that we are going to have some actions and some work to do, but it doesn't mean trudge as in the way that it means it today. That might even be on the dictionary sheets that I handed out. But may God bless you and keep you until then. So we're going to write one little thing on the next page. Do what the first 100 did, and you will get what they got. Do what the first 100 did, and you will get what they got. Right? And what they got, do what the first 100 did, and you will get what they got. They got that wonderful fellowship that we just read about, right? They've got wonderful friends. They've got a wonderful relationship with their Creator. They are happily and usefully whole, right? Through working these steps and developing a relationship with God and with the people about us. So, happily and usefully whole. All right, guys, that is it for Code Blue. But don't everybody run off, because I got something for everybody. This last session, let's end it again with the third step prayer, which is on page 62. On page 63, sorry. It's also a great way to start your day. Page 63, middle of the page. God, I offer myself to Thee, to build with me and to do with me as Thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do Thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of Thy power, Thy love, and Thy way of life. May I do Thy will always. Peace. All right. Thank you.